It's about to start, we'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound, check. Camera, check. Lights, check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello, my name is Leandro Facchinetti, and let's write some code together, shall we? What we have on the menu today is to try and improve on the thick lines that we are going to use on the knobs that we are going to use in the auto mixer. It's one of those situations where you start with something, you think it's gonna be simple, right? It's never simple. And now we are 3 problems in. Anyway, what we have been doing on this series of streams is to develop real-time audio effects for REAPER using the JSFX language. And we are working on this auto mixer plugin, but I'm not even going to bother explaining the auto mixer because really the point of today's stream is the knob on the user interface. And I'm not going to even explain the knob because the point of today's stream is just to draw a line indicating where the knob is. And we want that line to be perhaps 1 pixel thicker than what's given to us in JSFX. And we are going to spend some time trying to get exactly that. Let me show you how things look right now. So this is the knob that we have been drawing, and we are drawing this using the primitives for drawing in JSFX. And these primitives are pretty rudimentary, kind of by design actually. And we are trying to draw this indicator of where the knob is. This is not even the auto mixer, it's just a test effect for a single knob. And as you can see, it looks horrible. We want this line to be a little thicker, and in JSFX there is no way for you to have a thicker line. You can only have a single pixel of stroke width. But a single pixel looks too thin. So we are trying to get this other idea going. And check this out. This is so bad. Aliasing here is super bad. I mean, there is this part that is a single line, and then this part becomes 2 lines, but there is no gray in between. Like for instance, the circle has some gray around it. That's anti-aliasing. And yesterday we even played around with the idea of putting circles at the ends of the line to try and get some round caps on the line. It doesn't look good. And as we move the knob around, we can see it getting in and out of shape. It really looks terrible. Anyway, let's revisit the implementation we had yesterday, the idea for the implementation that we have for today, and even this other kind of wacky idea I had after yesterday's stream. But before we do that, let me say hello to Mage, who is here with us. Hello. It's great that you are joining us today. All right, so the idea that we implemented yesterday, the one you saw on the screen that kind of looks terrible, is to draw not a line, but draw a rectangle. So if you wanted to draw a line between these 2 points, you would actually draw this rectangle that starts and ends at the points, but is slightly thicker than just 1 pixel. That's the idea we had yesterday. The problem with this idea, it turns out, is that the drawing primitive for drawing polygons in JSFX does not know how to anti-alias. And that's what we saw on the screen. The idea we had for today is this idea on the title. Thick lines using stacks of lines, which is an idea that we have implemented in the past. And this one goes like this. If you want to draw this line between point P1 and point P2, you draw this line, which is going to be a single pixel because that's the only thing that JSFX knows how to do. And when it's drawing this line, it knows how to anti-alias. But then draw another line right next to it, and draw another line right next to it, and draw another line right next to it. So you draw this stack of lines that is going to fill in this rectangle, one line at a time. And this is an idea that we have played around with before on the streams, and it sort of works. But what I don't remember when we were playing with this is if we had any lines that were not just strictly horizontal or vertical. If the line has any kind of angle, then the anti-aliasing will kick in and make things worse because you are not landing on exact pixels when you're doing that, these diagonal lines. So we'll see about that. So we may play around with this, but I can imagine that there may be a problem. And the problem is that when you have this diagonal line, it will do some anti-aliasing on this line, and that's exactly the point. But it does mean that if the line is, for instance, black, it does mean that some of the pixels in here will be black, but if you land on something that is like half a pixel, this half of the pixel is in the line, then this pixel is going to become gray. That's what anti-aliasing is after all. That's what anti-aliasing is to turn some of these pixels gray. And that's what we saw on the screen with the circle. The problem is that if you stack a bunch of these together, this pixel is, for instance, a shade of gray, and then when you try to draw the next line, it's going to be another shade of gray and another line. And I'm not sure about this, but my intuition tells me that perhaps what we'll see is a pattern here. Instead of having solid, for instance, if the line is supposed to be black, instead of having solid black in the middle, we will have a pattern of a patch of grays. And that's not what we want, right? So I imagine that this approach has the problem of not anti-aliasing, and this approach has the problem of anti-aliasing too much. So I have an idea of how to combine the two. But first I want to explore what this looks like just for the sake of it, because I think it will be fun. Let's set the color to white and then draw, I guess, 4 lines. Let's draw 4 lines. And in terms of coordinates, where are these coordinates coming from? Oh, these coordinates are coming from the drawing of the button. We are doing an experiment, so I will not reuse these coordinates. I will come up with new coordinates. So let's say that we are going from 100, 100, down to 200, 173. This value is kind of off on purpose because we don't want this line to be at an exact 45-degree angle. When it is at exactly 45 degrees, anti-aliasing is easier to do. It's kind of a special case for anti-aliasing that's easier to do. So we said that we would be drawing 4 of these, or I guess for the sake of it, let's do 6 of this. And what we'll do is just stack them vertically. So I will just increase this by 1 each time, and increase this by 1. each time. Oh, I was right. Stacking a bunch of lines does not work if you're trying to do angles. If you're not trying to do angles, I think it does work, because we have seen this before, and anti-aliasing will not be an issue. So let's do a horizontal line by keeping the x-coordinate always the same, the y-coordinate always the same, so it's going to be a horizontal line. Yeah, horizontal lines work, and diagonal lines don't work for the reason I was predicting. So yay me, at least I'm able to reason about things still. Great. So what we learned is that we thought of two approaches, neither of which work. We have this approach of drawing a polygon, anti-aliasing doesn't happen. We have this approach of stacks of lines, anti-aliasing happens too much. How about we combine the two approaches? That's the wacky idea I said I had after the stream yesterday. So the idea is we would draw a polygon for filling in the shape, and then we will draw some lines just around the edges to smooth out and anti-alias just the edges. Perhaps one line will do, or maybe we'll do 2 or 3, just to make sure that the borders look good. That's the plan. I notice in the docs, GFX line can have the anti-aliasing off, so you could have it on only on the outside lines. True. What you're saying is correct, and it amounts to the same as my mixed approach, because you're filling in the middle and you are anti-aliasing the borders. So I guess we are thinking kind of the same idea, which is great. It's great to have social confirmation. But I think I prefer the idea of combining polygons with lines, because we will fill in the middle of the shape with a single polygon, which is probably going to be, one, faster, because you're drawing less times, you're calling fewer functions to draw. And second, it will probably look better, because I'm not sure that the lines are going to stack perfectly, even with anti-aliasing off. As we learned yesterday, and Dale explained to us, some of the primitives in the JSFX drawing and some of the primitives in lice as well, they treat some things as integers, some things as floating points, and when things are floating points, it's always crazy. So yeah, we'll do the polygon for the filling in and the lines for the anti-aliasing on the borders. I really didn't want to get so deep into drawing, but here we are. And Bo is here. Hello. I am doing good. I'm happy that we are probably going to have some good-looking knobs today. Yes, an inner polygon is better after thinking about it. Okay, great. It's good that we agree on this. So I guess let's not keep this experiment around, because we learned what we needed to learn from it. But let's go here to the function that is drawing with this crazy little knob. And besides the triangle and the circles, let's also draw a line between I'm not even sure which points we want to target here, but I think they are these 2 points. And then another line between these 2 points. I'm going to write it like this because this is out of order, which makes sense when specifying points to draw a polygon. But I think it makes more sense to draw the lines like this. It's just, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, is this going to make any difference? Are we going to solve the drawing problem with two lines of code? Oh, maybe we are. Okay. Check this out. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. For instance, this does not look great. This aliasing here at the bottom, but the top looks fine. The circles at the end may be making things worse. For instance, here, the circle at the end, I think, is making things even weirder. So let's get rid of those. Something like this looks pretty nice. I really like this, the anti-aliasing that is happening here on these lines. And one thing that I was worried about when I played around with this idea in my head, I was worried that the lines would leave some gaps between, I guess, the field in polygon and the line. There would be a little gap, but it appears that this is not the case. Another thing that appears to be happening is that even though I am telling the polygon and the lines to draw from exactly the same coordinates, it seems as though one is going a little bit longer than the other. For instance, here we see that probably what's happening is like one is only dealing with integers and the other is dealing with fractions, with fractional numbers. So we can sort of see a line here that goes a bit out of the shape of the polygon. But perhaps we can cover this if we also draw little lines between these points that my cursor is on top of. Maybe that will help close in this gap, for instance. And if you look at it from a distance, it looks okay-ish. Still not perfect, but perhaps if we add a couple more lines, it will look better. So this is between points P0A and P0B, and then the same for P1. So those are the lines between this position here and that position there. Let's see what that looks like. If I remembered to save, I did. This is somewhat better, I want to say. Yeah, at least we are not getting the little gaps on the shape. At least, I want to say that at least now the shape is convex. Still doesn't look perfect though. For instance, when it is around here, it may be an optical illusion, but tell me if you see the same. It seems as though this is thinner than that. Do you also see that? It seems like it's thinning out as it's getting to the middle. Which is a bit crazy, but I think I am seeing that. And it seems like it gets thinner here and then thicker again. Isn't mathematics just lovely? If you were crazy, you could write your own polygon routine with a scanning fill algorithm. Yeah, we could always implement our own anti-aliasing in JSFX, which could be a fun exercise, but I don't think it will be super fast. So I'm not so sure it will be useful in this context. Yeah, not so sure. Now that we have these two lines, what happens if we bring in the circles again? No, the circles don't really match up with the lines, so the circles make things look worse. Let's get rid of the circles for good. They're not coming back. Well, if one line made things a little better, what about multiple lines? And if the problem is with fractional numbers, what happens if we floor everything? Because now my assumption is that the polygon is not in the same coordinates as the lines. So perhaps the lines are aware of subpixels and the polygon is not, which stands to reason because the lines are aware of anti-aliasing and the polygon is not. So if I am right in this assumption, one thing we could try is to just take like the floor of these computations and that will have the effect of landing on exact pixels on all these coordinates. Is this going to help? Not really. It feels about the same to me. What if we try the other way around? Instead of floor, we try the ceiling. Looks about the same to me. There's something that stands out to me. It seems as though, for instance, in this case, perhaps the polygon is on top of the lines. Because we see this disruption here, and I don't think that lines would do this. I think that the polygon is doing that. So perhaps what we need is not just one line to cover things up. We need two lines to cover things up. And to compute the coordinates of these lines is kind of annoying. Because the only way I can think of doing this is to recompute this whole shenanigans, but add 1 to these coordinates. In other words, make the stroke width 1 pixel larger, but then recompute this whole thing. Unfortunately, that's the only way I can think of doing this, so that's what I will do. The angle doesn't change, so I don't need to recompute that, but everything here needs to be recomputed. So this will make the stroke width 1 larger, so we will be 1 pixel out of the shape. We'll be protruding out of the shape. And this does make the thing thicker, as one would expect. And it is protruding out of the shape, all right. Perhaps it's protruding out of the shape a bit too much, even. And when you start moving it around, it's so interesting the way that the polygon interacts with the lines. Yeah, the polygons and the lines go all over the place. Sometimes we see a bit of a gap. Sometimes the gap goes away. Very interesting. It looks like a disparity between the two routines. Yeah. So with that, I think that we will revert to your proposal, Mage, in which we use line drawing for everything, but we turn anti-aliasing on and off depending on whether we are at the edges. All of this to not use a PNG. This is crazy. Okay, so that's not gonna fly. We want to get rid of this. And I think that the way to think about this is we want to have a loop because now we are going to draw a bunch of lines. How many lines are we going to draw? Well, I think that we are going to draw at least as many lines as the stroke width. So if you want the stroke width to be like 2, we are going to draw at least 2 lines. And I think we need this notion of an X increment and a Y increment. So we are going to start X at well, not really. Yeah, let's have this notion of an X increment, which is I think I need to go back to the paper to reason about this. So we have computed these 4 points at the edges. Now what we want is to do a loop of length stroke width. So we will be looping, for instance, from this to that. Well, I think it makes more sense to go from A to B than to B from B to A. So let's say that no, it is going in this direction. Like so. So it's going from point A to point B, and it's going to take stroke width steps along the way. And my idea is that, okay, so we're going to start at this point, but we need to know on each one of these steps, how much do we go to, I guess, the left in this case? Well, we can just take the difference between these two guys and divide by the stroke width, and that's our step. So the X increment is equal to P1 BX minus P1 AX, all of that divided by stroke width. And the same for the Y coordinate. And we will leverage the symmetry of this shape and this shape. So along our loop, we will be, I guess, incrementing this X increment, both to P1A as well as to P2A. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it like this. So x increment is p1bx minus p1ax divided by stroke width. And y increment, why did I capitalize the x's? It doesn't matter because JSFX is case insensitive, but still. And let's declare these variables as local variables as well. And then in the loop, we will also have a variable that is like loop index. Well, loop index is a fine variable name, but it highlights weird. So I will just have a variable called index that starts at 0. And I will increment the index each time we go around the loop. And I will want to anti-alias when the index is 0 or when the index is equal to stroke width minus 1. Yeah, that sounds about right. So I will want to anti-alias on the first line and on the last line of this loop. Anti-alias should also be a local variable. Then in this, I will be drawing a line. I got rid of the first 2 lines, but I will not get rid of these 2 lines because these are the lines between A and B. In fact, I think I should be drawing these lines first. Then, okay, so I do this. And then I increment P. Oh, hang on. This actually works only by chance. There is a problem. We made our points P0 and P1 in the code, but in our paper here, we call them P1 and P2. P1 and P2. So our formula talks about P1, but it should be talking about P0. So P0AX needs to be incremented. And the same for the y coordinate. Does this look right? Not really. I feel like I should be incrementing these 2 as well. Now it looks more right to me. Okay, let's see what this looks like then. Hey, it is drawing something. I will take that as a win. And as I move it around, it does not look perfect, but it's looking better. So one thing that we know is that we should be calling this with the anti-alias variable as well. I defined it, but I forgot to pass it as an argument. So let's try that and see. Because the main problem I see right now is that there is a little bit of a gap in the middle. But that's what we saw when we tried to anti-alias all the lines. And now we are only going to try to anti-alias the first and the last line. And unfortunately, I think I still see a bit of a gap. But except for the gap, this looks better. I still see the line getting thicker and thinner. When it falls exactly on the pixels, it gets a bit thinner, for instance here. And when it gets out of the pixels, it gets a bit thicker, like here. But it does look a little bit better. Let's see what you all have to say. The docs say GFX line X, Y, X2, Y2, AA. If AA is not specified or 0.5 or greater, it will be anti-alias. Does AA have any meaning when it is 0.4, or is it just an odd flag? I think that it is a Boolean flag. So 0 means don't anti-alias. Anything that is not 0 means anti-alias. At least that's how we are using it here. We are using it as a Boolean. I think that that's what it is. I don't think you can like fractionally anti-alias. And I don't think that the threshold for false or true is 0.5 or 0.4. I think it's just 0 or not 0. Like a Boolean in C, for instance. That's how I understand it anyway. But why are we getting a little bit of a gap now? Also, why do we get these weird glitches at the ends of the lines? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But we are getting a little bit of a gap, aren't we? Well, you know what this could be? The fact is that in this context, we are passing a stroke width of 1. And because we are on a retina display, it means we have 2 pixels. Stroke width of 1 means 2 pixels. So it means that we should only be drawing 2 lines. And then that may be why we see a little bit of a gap in the middle, because we are only drawing 2 lines. So here is one idea. What if we, this is kind of a hack, but what if we add 1? This forces us to draw at least 3 lines, and perhaps we'll get rid of that gap in the middle. No, it gets worse. Now we see a gap to each side of the line. Oh well. These gaps can either be because of the way that JSFX draws, or it can be because we are passing fractional coordinates and then the line is turning them into integers. But it is rounding up and down in weird ways. So again, one last time, I know it didn't work before, but we'll try it again. I will try to floor these coordinates. Oh, and I was asking why do we have these weird glitches at the end? They are probably because of these two lines. Again, rounding and everything. Yeah. Now it is pretty clear what's going on. We are definitely starting the three lines from three adjacent pixels that don't cover the plane all that well. But you know what's interesting? If we zoom really, really all the way in, we can see that when you turn on anti-aliasing, the line kind of smears outwards. That's how it does the anti-aliasing. The line occupies more pixels on the screen. So we will try flooring, but then we will try another idea, which is to draw two lines, one with anti-aliasing off and one with anti-aliasing on exactly the same coordinate. The filled in version is going to hopefully, fill in the gap. And the anti-aliased version will smear and, well, I guess, cover the transition between black and white, if that makes any sense. But let's try flooring first. Well, as expected, it doesn't make a lot of difference. I'll take it. Just for completeness, here is sail. Yeah, we still see lots of gaps. Now, let's try this idea where we draw with anti-aliasing off and on all coordinates. I was going to put an if here. I was going to do something like this. We don't really need that, do we? We could draw with anti-aliasing on in all the lines. But anyway, let's draw it like this and see if it looks any good. No. We still see lots of gaps, and we see the starts of the lines here in the middle jump around as we rotate. Well, it looks pretty good when it's not in subpixels. Hey. How are you all doing? Hey, Leandro, on Mac. Hello, Jesse. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Leandro, on Mac, if you hold Command and click Edit, the button will reload the JSFX. You don't have to keep removing and adding it. If you hold Command and click Edit... Good to know. What's the extent of this reloading? Is it equivalent to what I'm usually doing, removing and re-adding? I didn't know about this command edit thing, but if it is equivalent to clicking this, I'm not sure I'm going to trust it, because there are some things that this doesn't fix, and removing and re-adding the plugin is the only thing that makes it work. I'm trying to remember an example of this. I think that if we have strings, and then this string is generated in the library. So now, for instance, we expect to see a big hello in the beginning. So I changed the library, and if I do a full compile reset, oh, it picks it up. So yeah, I don't remember an example of this, but I remember a case in which this full compile, recompile, reset was not doing it for us. And I think it had to do with the user interface, and the only way to fix it was to remove and re-add the plugin. So I got into the habit of doing that, but perhaps that's not even a problem anymore. And this whole clicking on edit is pretty convenient. But since I have your attention, do you know how to draw thick lines? How do you do that in REAQ? Definitely there is a thick line here, and it looks pretty good, but I want to say it is anti-aliasing. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. These circles are probably drawn with the primitives, but that's all right. Circles are relatively easy. But these lines, for instance, they look like they are a bit thick. Thicker than just 1 pixel. Looks pretty good, actually. And the idea I have for knobs is not too far from this. These knobs look great. So perhaps I could just steal the knobs from you. But really, how do you do this drawing? We can dive into the code to figure it out, but if you have a high-level explanation, that would be great. Wow, thanks. Works on Windows 2 with control-click on edit. Nice, good to know. Hello, Tail. Yeah, it completely reloads it. Interesting. Draw the lines with subpixel and use alpha blending. So what you're saying is, when you say drawing lines with subpixels, you mean you are passing coordinates that may be fractional, like we are, because these coordinates here may be fractions. So that's why what I understand from drawing the lines with subpixel. But using alpha blending, that's interesting. That has to do with the mode. Additive blend mode, if you would wish to subtract blah blah blah, add 2 to disable source alpha, add 4 to disable filtering. Alpha blending. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by alpha blending in this context. Can you explain further? Again, I did that thing I did yesterday. I opened Psyche's plugin yesterday and I looked at mine. Now I'm looking at REAQ and I'm looking at what I have. It's so embarrassing. Oh well. And when you double click this reset, they don't. Okay, so at least we have that leg up on REAQ. On REAPER, anything that you double click resets. But in REAQ, if you double click on a knob, it does not reset. And in our knobs, when you double click, they reset. It's something. Maybe you reset the knobs with Command or Option or Control or Shift. No, none of this. Oh, you hold Command and double click, and then it resets. Okay, so they have the functionality. You just have to hold Command. And if I hold Command, okay, it also works on mine and on Reaper. It also works on Reaper. Great. Okay. What should we try next? Perhaps this alpha blending stuff. Or we could dive into the source code for ReQ and see with our own eyes the code that is doing that. Or we could avoid these jumps. We could try avoiding these jumps by doing something that is much simpler. Doing something that is perhaps much simpler. Perhaps it will not look as good, but perhaps if the line is thicker than 1 pixel, but not so thick, it will not matter. The idea is, first, I guess let's commit what we have, because I'm about to nuke the whole thing. The idea goes like this. Get rid of all that. And get rid of all that. Good. Now, let's say that we want to do this in 2 loops. We will have a local variable called index. It starts at 0. Oh, I guess it will be a single loop. And we'll still be looping over the stroke width. The feeling I'm getting from this whole adventure with stroke width is the same feeling I got with the waveform display that we did. It started simple, then it got absurdly complex. The absurdly complex solution did not work. We reverted to something simple. Maybe it was different from the first simple idea, but it was a simple idea, and that worked. So things start simple, they get super complex, simple again, and then they're perfect. So on each iteration of the loop, we draw 4 lines. I think that all of them can be anti-aliased. I don't think it matters. Oh, but I definitely want to set the color. So let's do that before the loop. And then we draw 4 lines. On this one, we subtract the index from here. Do you see what I'm going for? On this one, we subtract the index from here. On this one, we subtract the index, I want to say from here and from there. And this is another case in which I probably want to add 1 to the stroke width for the loop. Do you see what I'm going for? I'm trying to like paint the whole area, but I'm not being smart. I'm not being smart and doing the whole angle, which I think may be what's messing things up, because we had until 1 minute ago, this whole idea of finding this angle and then finding this angle and then finding this, which is all fine and interesting, but it does lead us to getting into this subpixel situation, because this angle here may not be 45 degrees, so you may get into subpixels as you move along this line. And what I'm doing now is much simpler. I'm just painting this whole thing, and I am going 1 pixel at a time, so I'm never landing on subpixels. Maybe that will work better given the constraints of the drawing system. Let's see. Some of the lines are a bit off. For instance, these ones. And sometimes it gets closer to this circle and sometimes it gets further away from the circle. But at least origins of the lines from here, they are not jumping around. And they used to be jumping around, but they're no longer jumping around. That's a good sign. And if I make the distance between the end of the line and the end of the circle a bit bigger, you may not be able to tell that the line is getting just ever so slightly longer and shorter. This may work. It is much simpler conceptually, but it looks okay. When you get to this, the line gets visibly thinner, but overall it's acting fine. And I kind of put these coordinates here kind of just looking at the symmetry of the lines. But if I think about these coordinates real good, I think that I may get these weird lines to go away. Let's see what you all have to say. It's setting the alpha part of the RGBA color. Is that a thing in JSFX? I thought it was a thing in video processors. Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that you're not changing the mode of anything. Because here is what I remember. If I put a video processor on the track and I press F1, I go to the documentation for video processors, and in there they have RGBA as a color space for video. And I thought for a moment that you were talking about that, but you're not talking about that. What you are talking about, if I understand correctly, is just when you're setting the color, you also set the alpha, something like that. And then you do some of the drawing on the edges. So you are sort of doing anti-aliasing yourself with this trick. That's nice. If I understand correctly, I think that that's what you're doing. So, I think it's Command and double click. Oh yeah, to reset the parameters. Yeah, that's what you were talking about. And I managed to figure this one out. The stroke width should be separate for X and Y. Well, we could have that, but if we did, then the line would be potentially thinner here and thicker there. And that I don't think is a good idea. Oh, it's good to know that your synthesizer is going well. We should hear more about it at some point. If you want to come along for a stream and show it to us. And you are doing that, which is super interesting, single instruction, multiple data, which is a way to speed things up and leverage the pipeline of the processor better and the parallel capabilities of the processor better. So That's something that is super interesting and that we have not touched on at all in all of our streams. So yeah. And I think that when you are at this level, you kind of have to write specialized code for different processors. For instance, Mac M1 versus Intel. So super interesting to know more about this. If you are, I'm inviting you to join the stream at some point and talk about it. I've just looked at ReQ to refresh myself. In UIX thick line, I just draw a lot of lines to cover any pixel holes. Hey, we are sort of converging into the same idea. Great. And we arrived there independently, which is always a good sign. X increment and Y increment based on the cosine and sine of 1 for the angle. Yeah, I get that. But isn't that similar to what we just implemented and didn't look right? When you start taking in account the cosine and sine of things, you are start landing into subpixels. And I think that that is the source of the issue. I think that the point is that we don't want to land on subpixels. Yeah. You are the one that keeps saying that copying code counts as coding. Yes. I'm not above copying things. But I do want to explore all these options because they are interesting. At least they are to me. I tried lots of different things. Yeah, see? That's part of the fun. And there are situations in which I keep copying things. And there are situations in which I try to derive things from scratch. I guess it depends on the thing, my interests, the mood. All right, yeah, let's just try and think about these coordinates and get some real good ones. Yeah, back to the drawing board for these coordinates. So I want to draw a line between point P0, I will be consistent with the naming this time, and P1. What I could do is similar to what we were doing before. So I don't know, I'm just thinking this out loud first time. So let's see if this stands any chance of working. So we could compute these lines that we know how to compute and compute our P0s, A's and B's, and P1, A and B. And we already know that if we try to draw the lines between these, they will look scrambled. But what if we decide to find this point as well? And then we draw this line, and we draw this line, and so on. We are guaranteed to have integer numbers all the way, at least for the endpoints. And if the endpoints are integers, then the line should look better? Question mark, question mark, question mark. What I'm doing now is super simple. I just want to test if the line looks okay when it is a single pixel of width. So the line function here is not taking into account the stroke width at all. It's just drawing a line between the coordinates you gave me. If the line stays consistent on the page this way, I think that this idea stands a chance of working. and sort of stays consistent. Yeah, we can try something like that. Or we can try why am I subtracting things? I think I should be adding things. And why do I have these two lines? I think I should not have these two lines. Not looking at the chat right now because I want to finish this thought. Then I will look at the chat. This is not half bad. This is not half bad at all. I mean, if you look closely, you will see that the end of the line is a bit out of shape. But I will take this any time of the day. Much better than the other versions we had. Is it going nearer and further away from the edge of the circle? Yes, it is. It is jumping around ever so slightly. But it's not something that bothers me too much, I don't think. This is the best version yet, I think. It does get a little bit thinner when we are at exactly 45 degrees. I think. But I will take it. There is just one little touch that is to the stroke width right now is to the right and to the bottom of the coordinates you gave. So I think I'm going to translate all the coordinates, or I guess I can just start the index at not at 0, but start it at stroke width over 2. And I guess I will rename the index to like offset, which is the offset of this line with respect to the given coordinates. I was checking at my frequently used emoji, and it seems like enough time has passed that my frequently used emoji doesn't have the middle finger anymore. I was writing an email, I was pissed off, and I used the middle finger emoji, and then it was on my frequently used emoji for a while, because I don't use that many emojis. And then I was always afraid when I was writing a message that I would click on the wrong emoji and send a middle finger to someone I don't want to send a middle finger to. But it seems like enough time has passed and I used enough emojis that it's off the list now. Could I have just right-clicked and removed it from the list? No, there is no way to manipulate the list except for using other emojis. All right, let's see what you all have to say. Maybe you are telling me to do exactly what I did, which often happens. You are the one that, okay, yeah, I already read that. Moving the lines by 45 degrees will always cause odd movements as you turn the knob. If the line is pointing left, the increment is plus minus in y and 0 in x. The opposite for when the line is pointing up. Yeah. And also things go in and out of alignment with the grid of pixels on the screen. Something odd, let's take another tangent. Something odd is happening with the views on the stream. Usually when I'm streaming and I'm looking at the numbers live, they are always around like 10 or 15, which for me is like amazing because it's a wild dream that 15 people would be interested in watching me code live. But now this number is going up. Are they changing the way that they count things? Are they suggesting my streams to more people and more people are clicking through? If you are new here, say hello. I'm interested in getting to know you. Okay, so now with this change, the offset starting at, it should be minus stroke width over 2. With this change, we will be drawing the thickness of the line around the coordinates you gave me instead of to the right and to the bottom of the coordinates you gave me. Sounds about right. And the way that I wrote this, I'm sort of doing like a cross. I'm sort of doing a cross where I keep the y coordinates the same and I go to the left and right. And then I keep the x coordinates the same and I go top and down. But I think that what I should be doing is not doing a cross. I should be doing like a square. We'll look into that next. Let's first check that I didn't break anything along the way. Oh, I got into the habit of deleting and reloading the plugin. I will never get into the habit of clicking edit. Oh, this looks so great. This is what we wanted this whole time. For whatever reason, it seems like when it is in this position, it looks nice. And when it is in this position, which is exactly a mirror image of the other position I showed, it looks thinner. I'm not going to stress over it, but it is a bit weird. And when it lands exactly on the pixel, it becomes thinner again. And I suppose we will be able to see the cross that I'm talking about if I zoom in. Well, maybe not. But if I make the line thicker, I think we'll see the cross. Oh no, I didn't click on edit. Yes, now we can see the cross that I'm talking about. So we are going up and down, we are going left and right, but I think what we should be doing is covering this square. Oh, and also we should be turning off anti-aliasing at some point. Yeah, let's turn off anti-aliasing when we are in the middle. Same logic as before. Now that's more like it. We do have anti-aliasing on the edges and it looks a bit strange on the edges, but that's just the nature of the game. But it looks super nice in the middle. It's all filled in the middle. Again, not something we will notice when I'm doing stroke width of 1, because that means 2 pixels on a retina display. So we don't get to see this middle being filled in. Now we have that. Great. So now let's try to get rid of the cross. And when you're not all the way zoomed in, this looks super legit. Very nice. Let's try to get rid of that cross. What did I change on this file? The stroke width. Okay. The way to get rid of that cross is to have this notion as a first-class citizen. I'm doing this as a variable because I don't want to have to compute this division over and over, since this is a routine that will be called often. Not a routine, a function. And I think that what we want to do is to subtract this from here and to, I want to say subtract this from there as well. Again, I'm not thinking, I'm just looking at the symmetry of the problem and trying to reason my way through. Well, let's give this intuition a try. I will save, click on edit. Yeah, I got the opposite of what I wanted. Now there is a square, except that I'm outside the square, not inside the square. But the top coordinate is right. The top coordinate is in the square, so to speak. So my intuition is half right, but maybe I don't want to subtract. I want to add. Oh well. It looks like a piece of junk. And it's still outside. So maybe I want to add in one axis and subtract in another. Or maybe I don't want to worry about it. Could also do that. Because as long as your lines are thick but not too thick, they look perfectly acceptable. I will call this done. We have lines with different thicknesses for this purpose. If you want to get better thick lines for other purposes, then go in and revisit this function. Or copy req. I'm wrapping up now. Tomorrow we have a meeting of the C++ Digital Signal Processing JUICE study group, so tune in for that. And for the time being, thank you to Made, Just Simbo, and Tail for joining me on the chat. Thank you to everyone else who is watching this, all 58 people of you watching this who are not active on the chat. I still appreciate you being here. And thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon and PayPal and that sort of thing. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow here for the study group meeting. Bye. Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all will be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling.
The next time I'll be streaming.